segregating the South.
You're being purposefully obtuse, and your viewers can see that.
You're being purposely
because
obtuse.
They know exactly what it means when you crack a district from
Oh, this is one of those moments where the setup sounds confident right up until the facts walk in and shut it down. Welcome back to Pillarism. Today we're looking at a heated exchange on NewsNation where Katie Pavlich tries to corner Brian Tyler Cohen on gerrymandering. But what follows is a complete reversal. This isn't just a debate, it's a live breakdown of selective outrage, voting rights, and who actually benefits from the system as it stands. If you're here for sharp, no-nonsense political analysis, make sure you like and subscribe. Let's get into it.
All right, well, the left is still having a meltdown over a Supreme Court ruling that limits states from using race to draw their congressional maps. That gives Republican-led states the chance to add more seats ahead of 2028. The New York Times laid out a scenario like this, where red states could redraw maps to add up to 13 seats. While Democrats might be upset that Republicans may have more representation down south, they've been quiet about maps like this in New England, where Republicans have literally zero representation. And let's not forget to mention the selective outrage from the very same Democrats who were just campaigning to flip Virginia to a 10-1 Democratic advantage, like former Vice President Kamala Harris.
This agenda has been decades in the making of building up these states around gerrymandering. This is how they play. They are strategic, they think long-term, and they are ruthless.
But Republicans like Wesley Hunt say that race isn't relevant in elections.
There's been a lot of talk how there won't be any black Republican members in the new term. Yeah. What do you make of that?
Nothing. I don't understand how that's relevant.
But is it a problem with, like, recruitment? Or,
I don't think it's a problem with anything. I'm not here because I'm black. I am here because I'm qualified representative for Congressional District 38, and the American people choose who they want to choose.
Joining us now is Brian Tyler Cohen, progressive YouTuber. Brian, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. So can you just explain to me how Democrats who are just calling to change Virginia's map are selectively being outraged about the Supreme Court ruling?
This Supreme Court ruling is basically rolling back the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And I think the fact that you can see Democrats applaud what happened in Virginia does not negate the outrage, the virtuous outrage over what happened at the Supreme Court. When Democrats are applauding what happened in Virginia, it is in response to a cycle that was started off, that was sparked off by Donald Trump deciding that he was owed 5 seats, entitled to 5 seats in Texas, and yet no Republicans had any issue with that. They seem to just decide that if Donald Trump calls for 5 seats in Texas, that there should be no response from Democrats. In fact, I don't remember you saying anything about there being anything wrong with what was happening in Texas. So when Democrats are applauding action, a response in California, in Virginia, that is because Republicans decided to engage in this mid-cycle redistricting and push back against this entitlement that Trump felt in the aftermath of Texas.
Well, first of all, in Texas, the redistricting was legal under their system, and it's still proportional. Let me finish, Brian. It was still legal, and it's still proportional to the presidential election results, far more than what we've seen by Democrats way before Texas ever decided to do something. The Voting Rights Act.
That's irrelevant.
That's irrelevant. You don't get to say
this is a better.
Brian, there's nothing in the Voting Rights Act that says you can draw districts based on race, which is exactly what Democrats have been doing in order to maintain political power in Washington. I want to go back to these maps because you say Texas started it. Well, New England, there are 0 seats for Republican representation on Capitol Hill, despite 40% of voters in New England voting for President Trump in the last presidential election. If you look at Virginia and the way that it was, 6-4, now it's going to be 10-1. They had to draw this weird lobster in the middle where you have all of Northern Virginia, which is very heavily white, by the way, disenfranchising voters down in Southern Virginia. There are districts now that voted 75% for Donald Trump. They're now going to be represented by Northern Virginia. They didn't vote for that. You also have Illinois, with 14 Democratic seats, 3 Republicans, when 30+% of Illinois voted for Donald Trump. So you tell me, looking at these maps, how that is a fair representation for Republican voters in states like Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, et cetera.
Right, and we can play the same game in South Carolina, in Alabama, in Louisiana, in Georgia, in Florida, in Texas. You conspicuously left all of those out, but that really raises the question here that because gerrymandering is happening everywhere, shouldn't Republicans support a nationwide ban on gerrymandering? And yet, when that was put forward in 2020, yes,
the most gerrymandered seats in America are not from Republicans, as we just showed on the maps. I want to ask you this question.
Take a look at. Wait, hold on. Let me respond to what you just said. First of all, take a look at Dan Crenshaw's previous district, and then tell me that gerrymandering doesn't exist in these Republican states. But second of all, every single Republican voted against the 2021 Freedom to Vote Act. Every single Democrat voted in favor of it. That would have banned partisan gerrymandering nationwide. Republicans right now have full control of government.
We all
House,
know
Senate,
that the
White
language
House.
of that benefited
There are no Republicans putting forward
legislation.
Excuse me. Let me just finish what I'm just saying. There's no legislation being put forward to ban gerrymandering nationwide. So you can, if you think it's such a scourge that you can point to New England and say that there are no Republican representatives, Republicans have the power right now to fix it, but they don't because they know that they benefit from it.
And Democrats are the ones who've been doing this.
Democrats don't have control of government right now. Republicans do.
I want to ask you this.
Do you support it nationwide?
I support the Supreme Court ruling because I don't believe in drawing congressional districts based on race because that's racist. Can Democrats win?
Because you
I have a question.
Wait.
Brian, do you believe that Democrats can win?
You think it's racist to have representation?
The Supreme Court just desegregated
you
the
think
South.
having one
Democrats
district
in the South were
in South
segregating
Carolina.
the South by having race-based congressional districts, which the Supreme Court just ruled against. That's what just happened.
So
Democrats
when they
apparently
crack
can't
these
win
districts,
elections unless they draw districts based on race. Whether they can't win elections because people are fleeing blue states for red states, and they can't win elections because in the census they are counting illegal aliens as part of congressional districts, which Democrats are opposed to taking out of that because they need them for congressional representation. So when they
crack these districts, when they crack these districts, and black voters in South Carolina,
they can still vote
Tennessee,
wherever they want. You just don't draw the lines based on race, which is racist.
You're
desegregating the South.
You're being purposefully obtuse, and your viewers can see that.
You're being purposely
because
obtuse.
They know exactly what it means when you crack a district from a jurisdiction where there are overwhelmingly black or brown voters, and now all of a sudden those districts are cracked into 3 other districts so that their voting power is diluted. This is exactly the impetus.
I know that George Wallace and Joe Biden were against desegregation
This was exactly the impetus for the Voting Rights Act of 1965. This was exactly the impetus for the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
Brian Tyler Cohen, thank you. Talk to you soon.
What makes this exchange so instructive isn't just that Brian Tyler Cohen pushes back. It's how he does it. He refuses the frame that Katie Pavlich is trying to impose, and that's the turning point. Because the setup is clear. Isolate a handful of blue state maps, present them as the whole story, and use that to argue selective outrage. It's a classic narrowing tactic. You limit the scope, control the narrative, and hope the audience never zooms out. Cohen does the opposite. He widens the lens. He brings in South Carolina, Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia, Florida, Texas, states where courts and reporting have repeatedly flagged district maps that dilute minority voting power. And once that broader map is on the table, the argument changes from Democrats are hypocritical to this is a nationwide structural issue. That's not a small shift. It's the difference between anecdote and system. Then comes the second pivot, legislation. When Cohen points out that Republicans voted against nationwide reforms that would restrict partisan gerrymandering, he's not just rebutting a claim, he's testing consistency. If gerrymandering is the problem, what did each side do when given a chance to limit it? That's a measurable standard, and once you apply a measurable standard, rhetoric alone can't carry the argument. Now look at the exchange over race. Pavlich argues that drawing districts with race in mind is inherently discriminatory. Cohen counters with the historical context that led to protections in the first place, namely the dilution of minority voting power through district design. That's the core tension, whether race-conscious remedies are themselves discriminatory or whether they are necessary safeguards in a system with a documented history of exclusion. That's not a new debate, but it's a consequential one, because if you remove those safeguards without addressing the underlying patterns they were designed to prevent, you don't get neutrality. You get a reversion to outcomes those safeguards were meant to correct. That's the concern embedded in references to the Voting Rights Act of 1965, not as a talking point, but as a response to a specific historical problem. There's also a media dynamic here that's worth noting. The interruptions, the rapid pivots, the attempt to move from one claim to another before the previous one is fully addressed. That's not accidental. It's a way to maintain narrative control. But when a guest stays focused, answers directly, and brings the conversation back to verifiable points, that strategy loses effectiveness. The audience can track the argument, and once the audience can track it, they can evaluate it. That's why this moment lands, not because one side is louder, but because one side is more consistent in how it applies standards across the board. If gerrymandering is a problem, it's a problem everywhere. If it's acceptable everywhere. But you can't credibly argue both positions depending on which side benefits. That's the contradiction this exchange exposes. And that's the broader takeaway. Political debates aren't just about positions. They're about frameworks. Who sets the terms? What evidence is included or excluded? And are the standards being applied consistently? If you want analysis that doesn't just replay the argument, but actually dissects how it's being made and why that matters for democracy, make sure you subscribe to Pillarism, like the video, and share it with someone who wants clarity over spin.